welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotello Esquire, Mike Lano, and Evan Ginzburg. Would you like to introduce our guest for tonight?
Mike.
Well, I have a longtime historian, noted author. He's a podcast expert, knows way more than I do. Blogger. He's pretty much done everything. But now he's got this terrific book, Way of the Blade. Our guest, author, Phil Schneider, and artwork was done by Chris Bryan. Tremendous book, guys. And Ev, who do you have on tonight?
We're going to have the Guardian of Chaos the second half of the show.
All right, very good. So tell us a little bit about your book, or how did you first get involved in wrestling? We were talking a little bit before the show started, but how did you first get involved in wrestling?
I started watching wrestling when I was 10, I think, sort of right around 86. Like wrestling, right in between WrestleMania 1 and WrestleMania 2.
Sorry to interrupt, but would you be watching Wally George on TV 20 right before the Superstars of the Saturday Night Wrestling?
In the Bay Area, that was on like at 10 o'clock Saturdays and Sundays.
Yeah, in the Bay, I think it was on the Saturday. It was on Saturday morning. Superstars.
Yes.
I mean, this was a long time ago, guys.
That was on Channel 44.
Channel 44. Channel 44 had Superstars, and Channel 20 had World Championship Wrestling, and then we got cable, and we got to watch,
that's right. But they would usually show Wally George on right before.
Yeah.
So you get all whipped up into a. I don't know if you remember Wally George, but he was this talk show host in Southern California that was like Jerry Springer before Jerry Springer.
I definitely vaguely remember that. It's like one of those names that rings a bell. I'm sure I watched a little bit.
No, the guy was a total work, which he's admitted. I went to a couple of those tapings. His daughter was Rebecca De Mornay, famous actress who refused to have anything to do with him at the height of this. But he was like Mr. Ultra Conservative. So basically, he begat everything that came later on, from Morton Downey Jr. To some of those crazy, insane
Jerry Springer. Well, you had someone from the Jewish Defamation League and a Ku Klux Klan member, and that was one of the first chair swinging incidents where somebody, hit somebody.
I remember Geraldo got his nose broken by a Nazi. I don't know if I remember the Wally George one. I know Springer's famously worked. I think Jamie Dundee booked Springer. Which for a while, because you'd always see on Springer, like Bill and Jamie would just show up playing characters on Springer. You can watch some of that stuff on YouTube where Bill Dundee is like a pimp, and it's like all this stuff.
Where I am now, I'll tape you or send you some links when he had wrestlers on like John Tolis or Adrian Street, who we're going to have on the show soon, or some of these other guys. But his whole thing was a work, and oftentimes he promoted this. Really horrific disaster wrestling show. I forget what it was called, but it had Mondo Guerrero was booking it. And I'll have to have Mondo come on and talk about this. But this guy was a nut job. He was ultra-conservative Mayor Sam Yorty's head of PR. That's how he got this TV show. And what they do now here on this ultra-conservative, the same channel 56 KDOC that used to air him live in the first place, they're doing best ofs. And they put these long disclaimers saying that the show was farce to begin with, but
please watch it. We don't agree with any of it, but please watch it. So continue on with I'm sorry to interrupt you in your background, but anyone that has that in common, that you're watching wrestling literally at the same time I was on the same channels.
Yeah. So that's how it started, and I had sort of your normal childhood of a guy who's a wrestling fan who would get into wrestling magazines and look at all of those and read about the people that you didn't get necessarily see, on TV, and watch Legends of World Class on ESPN and AWA. And then at some point, right around when I end of high school, early college, so like the early 90s, I started getting into the early wrestling message boards, RSPW, and found a tape, like a Japanese video store in Hayward, California, that had Japanese wrestling television tapes. So I went to the Japanese video store, started renting tapes and then copying them. I convinced my parents to get a second VCR, copying them, and then started tape trading. So that's when I started around that time I started making comp tapes, selling comp tapes, Schneider comps, which became a thing that I sold for, a bunch of years, where I would put together like a mixtape of wrestling from all over the world and different promotions and then sell those. And the also was one of the original writers for the Death Valley Driver, which was one of the first big wrestling message boards. Dean Rasmussen was the guy who sort of almost invented the professional wrestling internet commentary. And I was he started it. He did like 3 of them. And then I came in on issue 4 and basically was the second guy in. We ended up with a handful of people, set up the Death Valley Driver message board, and was a big part of that whole community for a long time. And when the Death Valley Driver sort of died down a little bit, I started Segunda Caída, which is a blog that I do, and we write about we do a different wrestling review every day. And we've been doing that for 12 or 15 years. So that's how I sort of got into it. And John Snowden, who's published that book and published a Shamrock biography, and is working on a bunch of things, kind of started this like sort of niche publishing house for wrestling books. And I'd known him, obviously, not personally, but through that whole world for many, many years. So I just, hit him up and said, hey, I want to write a book. And he said, sounds great, let's do it. And so that's sort of how it ended up going. And then since the book's been released, I've been doing Way of the Blade, the podcast, where the idea is that I talk to one person about one of the matches in the book. And that's just started, but I've already had on some pretty, I had Brian Solomon, who writes for PWI and is writing the Sheik biography, to talk about a Sheik match. I had on Daniel Makabe, who's a really great professional wrestler from the Pacific Northwest, who's a big indie star, to talk about Daisuke Ikeda, Yuki Ishikawa, which is a match from Futen in Japan. He'd wrestled both of those guys, so we had a chance to talk about that. I had Tony Khan, who's the head of AEW. I had him on to talk about Ted DiBiase, Ric Flair. He's a big fan of that sort of Mid-South era, and he's a guy who goes back to the Death Valley Driver boards he posted on there. So I had him on. I had some other people lining up some other guests for that. So that's kind of how it all kind of came together. And the book, I'm pretty happy with how the book came out, and it's gotten a pretty good response from folks who've read it, seem to like it. And that was kind of my goal.
But in this book, too, you're international. And actually the very first thing, and I think you're probably aware, we can now trace pro wrestling back to 1860s France. But the very first of your 100 greatest bloody matches is from France, which I found really eye-opening and refreshing. But you got matches, obviously, from Japan, the U.S., Mexico, all over the place. And when you were a kid and you used to have to try to you wanted to see some of these videos that Evan and I saw when they came out, like I Like to Hurt People, that docu on the Sheik and the Detroit territory. Ev, he had to go to video stores that bordered on being, mostly porn content to get this outrageous reference. I want to throw over to
the good videos. Blockbuster would have, to have the WWF stuff.
Bloopers, blunders, and body slams.
Yeah, they'd have bloopers, blunders, and body slams. But if you wanted to get the good shit, the stuff that wasn't, Coliseum home videos, you had to go to the dicier video stores in the Bay Area.
Brent from about a couple of years later, after I Like to Hurt People. Ev, you've seen a lot of bloody matches in your day and a lot of cool stuff.
I saw Brody and Abdullah live, where they were bleeding and rampaging through the crowd, and the fans were fleeing in terror like it was a Godzilla movie. I saw Terry Funk and Eddie Gilbert live. Back in the day, there was always blood. There was always juice. So my big question would be, what do you think of Vince, publicly proclaiming, I'm paraphrasing now, I don't remember his exact words, that juice is, primitive or savage, and we don't do that kind of thing, like he's somehow above it all. What's your take on that?
They're a business. They're making a business decision. It's not something, I've always been more of a guy who wants to find and I think you probably saw that looking at the book. I want to dig into the crates, and I want to find the rare stuff. And that's what Segunda Caída has really been about since we started doing blog. We're not going to review Raw. I don't watch Raw. We're not going to review SmackDown. What we're going to do is
good move.
What we're going to do is find the French matches from the 1950s, and we're going to review those, and we're going to review some match. Some guys in Indiana are doing a shoot style promotion, and we're going to review Indiana independent wrestling shoot style matches and weird stuff from Mexico and obscure stuff from Japan, and this match from the 80s that somebody put up on YouTube that we didn't know was out there before. And that's what the spirit of the book is. So I'm not, at some point, I've sort of, after doing this for a while, obviously I haven't been involved in this as long as you guys, but 20 plus odd years. And I'm just kind of, I like the things I like, and that's the stuff I'm kind of interested in writing about and talking about. And I'm not going to spend a lot of my emotional or intellectual energy parsing what the WWE does. It does just, my fandom doesn't really include that as much. Every once in a while, somebody will recommend something. Hey, Phil, we'll think you like this match on NXT UK, and I'll dig it up and review it. But for the most part, I just kind of, even AEW, which I've got some more fondness for, like I said, I had Tony Khan on the pod. Even that, it's like, I'll catch parts of it. But, as far as regularly watching stuff, the stuff I'm regularly watching are the new Coliseo Colacaco shows from Mexico. When they got new one of those, I'll watch that. I'm excited about that. But as far as other stuff goes, I'm just kind of in my, I'm not interested in spending a lot of time talking about why I don't like something.
I'll tell you a funny juice story. I'm with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. At the time, she spoke maybe 7 words of English. She's from Korea, and I take her to an indie show, and these guys are brawling. So the one guy swings a chair at the other guy's head like a baseball bat. And the second it hits, I go, that wasn't right. The guy's head cracked open. They had to call an ambulance, 20 staples to the guy's head. And my wife is going like a mantra. She's going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I'm like, this girl's never going to see me again. but it all worked out in the long run. But that's a true story.
That happened when I took a date to go see a John Waters. It was Female Trouble. It wasn't the more famous one, and never saw her again. That was the end of it.
Pink Flamingos.
It wasn't Flamingos. It was the one that came after.
Yeah, Female Trouble. Yeah.
I always say it's a good idea. You can find a wife or a girlfriend who will tolerate this. That's what you want, is tolerate. Not necessarily try to find one who's going to be really into it. That seems, like my wife, she's excited about that I did the book. She certainly will give me some time off to do a podcast or two, but she's not going to sit there and watch Terry Funk matches from the 70s with me. She's going to be like, okay.
She's missing out.
Like, that's the sweet spot there. Tolerate.
Let me quickly show something. Terry, of course, has had his health issues. He's on the cover of your book, but I dragged down, along with your book, that's my shot of Terry in Los Angeles. He's sitting at the Olympic Auditorium in 1972 before facing Jack Briscoe. And then this is a bloody shot of him in it's either a Coraluzzo or an ECW show. His latest social media guy, I guess, interviewed him. It's kind of rambling, but he used my shots he made an LP of this because he owns a wax or a vinyl outfit. But Terry's, of course, a big part of the book, and
he's the wrestler who's in there the most. I could have written 100 of the greatest Terry Funk bloody matches and been perfectly happy doing that. I mean, and one of the best things about Terry, I think, is there isn't, a lot of the really, really great wrestlers in history have a match. You know what I mean? That they do, and it's some variation of their match. El Hijo de Santo, has been in a bunch of hundreds of incredible matches. But there's kind of a thing you're going to see with El Hijo de Santo. You're going to get the head scissors, handstand reversal. You're going to get the tope through the ropes. You're going to get, eventually he's going to build to the caballo. Ric Flair's got a hand. And, they'll vary it. Obviously, Ric Flair's got a match. You're going to see the same, 5 or 6 things from Flair or Bret Hart or almost anybody. There's no Terry Funk match. Terry Funk does. You know, it's not like if I go see Terry Funk, I'm going to see the things that Terry Funk does. Terry Funk, it's like he's like a improvisational jazz master. It's
That's
like
right.
he does a different song every time he goes. There's no, I don't know if there's a single spot that's in common in any of the Terry Funk matches that I have in the thing. He's playing completely different roles, right? Like the match from the '70s, the Harley Race match that's in there, which is incredible. If you guys never seen it, more of a recent tape release back when they were doing. Back when they putting out NWA Houston footage. You guys haven't watched the match. It's incredible. That's Terry Funk wrestling a NWA World Title match, and him as like a challenger in that. And then you've got Terry Funk as this like conquering American hero in Japan against Sheik and Abdullah. And then you have Terry Funk as a crazy, psychotic, lunatic heel against Ric Flair in '89. And then you got,
I was there at the I Quit match.
Yeah. This was I think I Quit match didn't have blood, so like that was kind of the rule for my book is I had to see some red to put it in the book. So I have the Great American Bash one in there, which is also an incredible match. And then so it's amazing, Terry. Just never every match in there is completely different. You don't ever see any repeated spots. They're all brilliant.
That brings up a question because I haven't read your book, but
it's available on Amazon, Russell. Not very expensive.
Thank you. We'll definitely have a chance to fully plug your book. But because you and I probably saw a number of the same matches at the same time because you were in the Bay Area during the same time I was. Did you see the AWA match, the cage match between Sergeant Slaughter and Larry and Kurt Hennig versus Legion of Doom and Paul Ellering? In a cage. That was in 1986, I believe. That might have been a little before, either a little before I started watching wrestling, or when I was legitimately just a 10-year-old kid watching Superstar. Because the other match, I definitely watched some WA, but it was like a little bit like a skosh later than that, like more of your Slaughter and Baron von Raschke. Where AWA was, I caught the tail end of the AWA. There's some good stuff in there. I wrote up the heading. The cage match between Larry the Crusher Blackwell and Sheik Adnan Al-KC, where he snuck in a foreign object and just started belaboring Crusher Blackwell, who was a pretty well-known bleeder at the time. That was like watching a blood bank. Fall over and catch fire. Some of those, one of the things that we did over at the Death Valley Drivers, we did a series of 80s sets where we would try to get 100 or 125 of the best matches from a different territory in the 1980s, send the discs out to everybody and have people vote. And there was definitely some of that really great Adnan Casey Blackwell, both teaming and feuding stuff on there, which I again was maybe a little before the point where I was watching the AWA, but I've certainly seen a fair amount of it tape. Blackwell's incredible. He's one of my favorite guys. I mean, not as much footage of him as you would hope, but the stuff that we have, there's a lot of really great Blackwell.
He was in part of Brody's camp. I just want to ask quickly because it's odd out of the blue for those of us who know Nick Cage. I don't know if Ev, you've seen him on the East Coast.
Yeah. I've seen him live.
Tony Khan's bringing him in the main event this Wednesday against Jericho. What are your thoughts, guys, on Nick Gage? How on earth he's not going to be the Nick Gage we know, because I'm just guessing how can he be that Nick Gage, against Jericho, who's not going to go for any of that shit. He's not going to go for the pizza cutter in the mouth stuff.
I've seen Nick Gage work clean shows before. He's a guy that's got really good connection with the crowd. I think he'll do great. Yeah. I think he's a guy. He's a guy who you could say what you want about that style of wrestling, and obviously I wrote a book on bloody wrestling. I like bloody wrestling. I wouldn't say I was the world's biggest fan of that sort of North Jersey style deathmatch wrestling, but Nick Gage is a guy who has a tremendous ability to connect to a crowd. So I'm not worried about him at coming with Jericho. And I think it's a cool thing that they're bringing him. I probably isn't going to come in more than once, but I think he's a cool guy to come in once. He's kind of a cult figure. He was on that A&E show. I think it's a good idea.
Do you guys think that we're at a specific point in wrestling history where there's never been a bigger difference in the wrestling styles of the two bigger companies than AEW and what the product they put out versus what the WWE is putting out right now. If you were to say that, because the WCW and WWE, when the Monday Night Wars were going on, the wrestling style that was in the ring was pretty much the same. I mean, they were mostly the same guys just moving back and forth. But what you're seeing, what WWE's strategy is on trying to do the entertainment side of things and being more, having movie style, matches at some spots, whereas AEW is really trying to go back to the hardcore wrestling fan and the older school style wrestling fan. I don't think there's been that big of a disparity between the two feds.
I think there was a pretty big disparity in 1989, right, or 87 or 88. I mean, I think the work style of a Hogan-led WWF promotion and a Flair-led NWA promotion were pretty different. And really, you could tell, especially you go back and you're watching that stuff. So I don't know. It's an interesting question. I think, AEW, the WWE, and again, guys, I don't watch a ton of it, but they do sort of do that sort of heavy work rate kind of wrestling a fair amount. I mean, I don't know if there's a giant difference between the way that Seth Rollins works a match and the way that Kenny Omega works a match. I think that style is pretty similar. It was kind of like, I call it kind of CrossFit wrestling, where just guys kind of going and going and going. Look at how good my cardio is. I'm going to get right back up and wrestle and do that kind of, not really my kind of thing. But I don't know if there's a giant difference in that in a way.
But AEW seems more international. They're bringing in top lucha guys, top Japanese guys, the guys from Britain, and etc. Sure. And WWF, it's so stale. The product is stale. It's over choreographed. And they're very limited. We don't have, as many surprises as AEW. Christ, I think they've got like 5 great Stardom or etc. promotion women coming in where, it's just like once a year.
WWE's got Miko Satomura. WWE's got I'm not got to hear the guy defending them, but they got a fair number of Joshi wrestlers.
They do. It's just not that many, and it's not a rotating constant shift. I mean, we've got Asuka. You've just got your X number, Io Shirai and Asuka, and there's very little surprises from week to week.
Well, they do that's definitely true because they do very much of a thing where they've got a crew, but they have such a big roster. I mean, you said they'd have AW is British guys. I don't know how often you guys watch NXT UK. I don't watch it that often, but they have like 30 British guys on their roster, and a lot of those guys really work that British style. It's just kind of buried on the network. So I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to be the guy. I mean, I'm not.
That's their best product overall. Is anything NXT UK or regular NXT? That was what was competing, and that felt more like the Monday Night Wars of the '90s. NXT versus AEW, same night, and both were great in their differing ways, and it was more fresh. NXT was far more fresh. I mean, look what this happens with the talent. They bring up Keith Lee to Raw. They buried him. He hadn't wrestled since January. They bring him out a week ago and had him job in just a matter of minutes to Bobby Lashley.
You know why they call it NXT? Because they go next after they kill the one guy off. Next,
That's true.
I like I said, I'm not. It's a weird role for me to be in, but I think that's the weird thing about. I think the interesting thing about the WWE right now is that they have put up so much product, right? I mean, we're talking about what is it? Probably 10 or 12 hours of wrestling a week. That if you cherry pick, you're just Drew Gulak's gonna get 11 minutes on the main event to work a match that's almost all on the mat. It's just like it makes sense. It's on TV. You can watch it. It's pretty cool.
Talented Drew Gulak just runs after the 24/7 title. That's all they have him doing the last.
Right now they have him working on the main event, which is a show nobody watches, and he gets like 10 to 12 minutes to work the mat against like other like random guys. Believe me, nobody's watching this. My buddy Eric watches it and makes me watch it sometimes. But like, that's the thing, is if you dig deep enough, like, that's the thing. I never watch Raw, but every once in a while, it's like, oh man, Drew Gulak had a 12-minute match against Ricochet on the main event that's really great. Kind of the way WCW would back in the 90s, where if you watch like worldwide, there would be like an incredible El Dandy Viano 4 match that would get like 9 minutes, and it'd be really, really good. And it's like, but if you watch Nitro, it would just be, lots of Kevin Nash run-ins. But
so what you're saying is, if I watch 12 hours of WWE, I could get about 20 minutes of good wrestling every week.
Oh God, I would never suggest you do that. That sounds horrible.
I'm joking.
My suggestion is that here's what you should do. You go to segundakaida.blogspot.com, our blog, and anytime we write up a WWE match, you go on the network and find that, and that's where you're going to find the thing. Let us curate for you. Find a curator. You can't watch 12 hours. I wouldn't do it. It sounds like the kind of thing you would punish somebody at. If you were trying, if let's say they were in prison and they started a fight in the yard, okay, instead of solitary, you just watch all of the WWE, all 12 hours of this thing. But so I don't recommend that. But you get a curator, you pick and choose. There's stuff out there that's pretty good. That's kind of the way it always is. I mean, there's never in the history of being a fan more of an opportunity to watch wrestling. Right? Like, I used to, back in the day, like I said, go to the Japanese video store and grab some tapes and tape trade, or pay $20 for this tape to Jeff Lynch or somebody like that. Now it's just all on YouTube, right? Almost all wrestling ever is on YouTube, or if it's not on YouTube, it's on WWE Network, or it's on independentwrestling.tv or High Spots, or all of these subscription networks. Like, you can watch it all now. So I think that's one of the things that I think the book does, I think my blog does, is try to be somebody who's going to curate a little bit of this. Where it's going to be like, look, you can't, there's so much to watch. You can never watch it all, even if that's all you did in your life. But here's the thing. This is the thing that you might want to watch from this show, or this is the one match you might want to watch from that.
Plug your book.
Yeah. So Way of the Blade, 100 of the greatest bloody matches in wrestling history. Pull it up. Available on Amazon right now.
Signed by Terry Funk in there? Is there their signature in the front?
Who signed? I don't know who signed your book. I don't think I signed the book. Who signed the book?
No, there's no signature. There's no signature.
Oh, okay.
The cool thing he does about the book, for example, he's got a UWF, a shoot fight outfit, for example, Nakano against Masakatsu Funaki, who later went on with Pancrase. But Phil breaks it down. He'll describe the context, the combatants, and then gets right into what he calls the collision for each, the way he does with like Liger, Naoki Sano, Fujiwara, Yamazaki, etc. So there's other elements. If you love combat sports, more MMA-like, even if it's worked, UWFI, Takata stuff, it's in here, and regular MMA. And then, of course, pro wrestling and gore, what we call in Japan garbage groups, which isn't really a good terminology. Legendary stuff, Moondogs against the Fabs. I mean, he's got everything in here. It is like a Bible of wrestling gore.
And I, what I kind of used as an opportunity, I would try to just talk about all the different corners of the wrestling world that I have a lot of fondness for. So, I want to get if I got a Memphis match in there, I get to talk a little about Jerry Lawler and what makes him a great wrestler, what makes him an interesting figure. Or, like I said, UWF wrestling in Japan, I get to talk a little about the history of that and how it was formed and who these guys are, and all of that stuff. I think it serves as a decent history piece for just wrestling all over the world. And I think it does a nice job of, there's definitely, I can't imagine there's anyone but me and Chris, who had to watch all the matches to do the illustration, who has seen all 100 of these matches, because it's so varied. And then there's Steve Austin versus Bret Hart from WrestleMania, but there's also, Black Terry versus Wotan from a little dirt arena in Mexico in front of 35 people, and it's all wrestling from the 1950s all the way up to a couple years ago, and so it gives a chance for folks to pick this book up. They'll definitely discover stuff that they did not know about, and all we have on the Hybrid Shoot, which is the publishing house, on his blog. There's a viewing guide where we have links to every single one of the matches. So if or almost everyone. There's some that aren't on YouTube. So anyone that's on YouTube are easy to find. You can click on that and watch it. Anything, if anybody gets the book and is listening to this and can't find the match on that link, I'm on Twitter. My DMs are open. I can get it into your hands if you need it for some of the stuff that is, even too obscure for YouTube. I got it all on my computer, so I can always get people copies of stuff.
Wonderful, Phil.
Well, thank you so much, Phil. We're going to let you go, but we appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
We'll love to have you on again soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being our guest.
All right, and joining us, the distinguished Guardian of Chaos. How are you?
I'm fantastic, Evan. Can you hear me, guys? Can you see me? Because I always have an issue, Evan, when you're 20 feet below the surface of the earth here in the bunker. How you doing, Dr. Mike? And what's going on, buddy?
Hey,
it's an honor to be here with
guest.
you guys. It really is.
Thanks for being our guest tonight. So please tell us how you got started in professional wrestling.
Wait a minute. Are you guys sure you want to know anything about how I got started in pro wrestling?
Yeah, go ahead and give us your origin.
Wow. Well, my moniker for the longest time is I was the most well-known unknown. I'm pushing 60 years old. I originally went to wrestling school when I was 21 years old in 1984 to Kenny Passarillo's Quest Gym in Orange, Connecticut. And the trainers were Tough Tony Altomari, Mario Mancini, all the ilk of Tony Gurria, Dr. D. David Schultz, Tony Atlas, Dave Barbie. All those guys were down there. And a lot of the guys had lived in the Hamden and the West Haven, Connecticut area. And while I was at Southern Connecticut State University in my freshman and sophomore year, I was bouncing in all the local clubs. So I ran into the Tonga Kid. I ran into all the Wild Samoans. They used to come into the club. So as a young man, I hooked up with them, became enraptured in the business even before that, and traveled with the Samoans, didn't quite get my feet wet, learned a lot very quickly traveling with the Samoan dynasty about what this business is really all about. And it really opens up your eyes. And not too long after that, as a young man, I ended up down in Tony Altomari's school with Mario and those guys, and they kicked my ass from pillar to post, not like they do now, not like you do in MTV, even Tough Enough. And I know that was a tough program too for the students. But what, and Evan and Doc, I know you guys can attest to this, back to the 80s when they put you through a wrestling school a la Johnny Rods down at Gleason's, or whether it be what was going on at Passarillo's and all the different schools, they worked you. It's nothing like what you do now. I mean, I'm an old school guy, and of course I can appreciate today's product. But so that's why I originally got my start, and then I got my ass kicked for weeks. I couldn't cut the mustard. I'll be honest. I was not good enough. Those guys beat me from pillar to post, and I walked away with my tail in between my legs and went into the Department of Corrections and became a corrections officer in a maximum security prison for the next 25 years. So I was a bounty hunter with David Schultz for quite some time. He trained me. But all through that time, I never lost that dream. I ended up getting married. I had a couple of kids, 2 beautiful daughters. And then in the late 80s, I rehooked up with the Samoan SWAT team because I knew them when I was a young man working in the clubs. We stayed close with when they were SST, Big Sam, and Junior. And I ended up traveling with them in WCW with some good friends and got to meet and hang out and learn the business with Butch Reed and Ron Simmons and Michael Hayes in the SST. And I'll never forget a story, Evan. I'll never forget a story. Junior, Rikishi, and I almost got into a little scrap on the road. We're traveling from Baltimore to Virginia. We're going from Hampton Arena to Virginia Beach. Now I'm trying to learn the business. I'm not in the business yet, mind you. I'm trying to learn. So as we're trying down the road, out of nowhere, Evan, Doc, buddy, bang, right across the side of the eardrum, it was Junior. It was Rikishi. He had fought, like a lot of guys, especially back in the day, this is the 80s, that I had disrespected him, which I didn't. Now, I'm going to be honest. We were under the influence. We had a couple of pops. Say no more. We pull over to the side. Junior gets out. Evan, I thought he was going to kill me. Here, now I was 320 pounds back then. I was a corrections officer. I wasn't going to take any bull. I'd been around. But you're talking about the Samoan dynasty. You're talking about Junior. So he was going to grab me and throw me through a plate glass window. Now, if you ever brought up this story to Junior right now, I don't even know if he would remember it, because we ended up years later teaming together, and he agreed to. So, and I don't even know if we ended up, but he taught me so much. It was a misunderstanding. I told my buddy that was his friend, please get in between. He's going to throw me through this plate glass window. So we ended up, I was so upset I came to tears because of the respect. You guys know how important in this business the respect is to everyone in this business. I didn't want these guys to think before I even got involved that I'm some hang around Mark wannabe that's disrespectful. That's the last thing you want in the business. So we ended up mending our fences. Long story short, the next day we're in the Baltimore Arena, the big feud between the SST and the Road Warriors. Now I'm sitting backstage in my glory still as a young man. I don't idol worship, but these are guys that you respect and admire. Here comes Animal and Hawk, right? I'm sitting next to the SST. And man, if I didn't get goosebumps, and I get it right now telling the story, for Hawk and Animal to walk over me. Now, I'm nobody. Again, I'm a piece of dust on the ground, not to undersell myself, but just to give you how it was in the 80s. And you guys know this. And Hawk goes, "Hey, Big Daddy, I heard you got in a little scrap last night." In that voice, that trademark Hawk, I got the chills, guys. And I said, "Look at this." I said, "Big Daddy, look at this." Because I was the guardian of chaos, Big Daddy. I said, "Look at this. The Road Warriors are actually giving you a smidgen in that business, the rub." And then, Rikishi had looked over at me because he knew, let's face it, he would have killed me that night. Come on, let's face it. These guys are savages. So, and he gave me the thumbs up. So that's something that I could take with me, that I relish in this business more than anything else, is the people that agreed to let me work with them. What an honor. So let me start rambling as we first opened up here. It's a long story, guys.
It's a great story.
Thank you, Evan. Evan, thank you so much. And I just want to say this, Evan, what you did for me on Avi Klein's The Green Room back when you were in the tournament against Glacier Ray Lloyd, what you did for me and the compliment that you did to put me over is something that I will never forget, coming from a guy that I respect and admire. I'm not blowing any smoke. I'm telling it how it is, because that's how I am. I'm honest. I'm genuine. But you paid me a compliment saying that I had talent. And we were talking about it in our Green Room conference today. And people were like, "Wow, can you believe that, Evan Ginzburg?" Because we respect and admire you. This is why.
Well, thank you so much.
No idol worship. It was so appreciated. It made my month, my year, and perhaps even along with the compliments from Terry Funk and Mick Foley. You're in the top 3, Mr. Ginzburg.
Thank you. What I had said was that in a sane world where great heel managers, great talkers, would be respected like they were back in the day, Guardian of Chaos, he should be on TV right now. This man can talk. Serious, with charisma, with talent. No, I mean it sincerely. I don't know why Vince got rid of heel managers. I think it was a terrible mistake.
We know why, guys. And Buddy Doc, chime in, because this is what I do on anything I've ever been on. I ramble and I talk and I talk.
That's better than listening to Mike.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. Hey, listen, I know of your guys' work, and this could turn into a quick interview where I end up interviewing you guys. Oh, wait, Evan, as I'm on the phone, look at this. Somebody's trying to get in here. How does this happen? What happened there, Evan? Am I back?
Your
back.
video went out for a sec.
Right now, I just want to let you know that right now that person, and again, this is not to make myself look good, because again, we know what the deal is. That was a WWF guy calling me, a legend from the 80s, in the middle. And now when I get off the phone, I'm going to call him back, and I'm going to say, "What are you doing when I'm on with Evan and the doctor? What are you doing?"
Who was it? You give the initials?
Yes, it was the Eminem. It was Eminem. He was voted one of the top 10 jobbers of all time and one of the top 3 in the WWE. And right now, he currently owns his own professional wrestling company with another guy who was a part of pretty wonderful in Power and Glory. And this is good. We could play a little trivia back and forth.
Mario Mancini.
No, Mo.
Oh,
really?
Yeah.
Well, Paul Roma's the second guy, isn't
Dr. Mike, again, well, I'm associated with those guys over the last several years for Paradise Alley Pro. I just went into their Hall of Fame, and what they do here in Connecticut in the shadows of the WWE, they bring back the old territory system. And I know that you guys know this, the New England Northeast area, even to this day, which is where I broke my bones, back to the Tony Rumble days and NWA New England, and back to the Savoldis and ICCW. This is a rich tradition. Even when the WWF used to come to the Coliseum and the Civic Center and all the areas of the Garden, Boston and New York, you guys know this. And that's why for me to be on with this particular group of men, this is my wheelhouse right here.
You would have loved yesterday. I was at Legends of Hamburg convention, and I'll tell you, there's Bob Orton Jr. walking by, and Jimmy Hart, and Johnny Rods, Dominic DeNucci, one after another, all the guys we grew up with. It was great. Yeah.
Yeah, Evan, I looked at that list yesterday because I had seen it on your timeline for the Legends of Hamburg for the reunion and Fan Fest. I mean, Rockin' Robin, The Godfather, you're right, Jimmy Valiant, the Nasty Boys. I mean, it really was something. And I noticed something, too, because I had a chance to meet this man at O'Grady's in New York. And R.I.P. to Jackie Mason, longtime comedian.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was one hell of a guy, I'll tell you. The one chance encounter, he was hilarious.
I saw him on Broadway. He was tremendous.
But getting back to your question, you had talked about, Evan, and I appreciate that compliment, because I studied back to years ago and consulted many, many times on different shows and being in the same locker rooms on the same events with Jim Cornette, Gary Hart, Captain Lou, Bill Alfonso. I made sure that I was able to pick those guys' brains because I wasn't good enough as a wrestler. I had the injury. So I transitioned and made my debut as a manager in 1992. And I took myself as a combination of Jesse Ventura, Bobby Heenan, and especially Captain Lou, Freddie Blassie, that kind of old school manager, and made it into my own. But it was a little late by then because in the mid 90s, here come your Sonnies, your Sables, and all that. And TNA, and they transition to eye candy. Here come the valets, and they get rid of the mouthpiece, which was the biggest mistake they ever did in that business.
No doubt.
Just my opinion.
I agree 100%. That was my role and what I did, in the early 2000s and over at All Pro Wrestling in Hayward. That was my shtick, was the same kind of like loudmouth Andy Kaufman.
Oh, wait, hold on. I take offense to the loudmouth.
Yes.
All right, well, heat generator then, however you want to call it,
Yeah, the business has changed. I did a little research on you, buddy, because I knew you were invested with Evan and with the doc, and I did a little research, and I saw that you were a pro wrestling manager. I mean, and just to be on here with Dr. Mike and going back to 66 as an author of the 605 podcast, Slam Wrestling, I mean, it really has been something, and all the different guys that you've been agents for, Evan. I did a lot of research knowing, I obviously knew who you were, Evan, back to the wrestler, and then 350 days. Dr. Mike Lano's been around for years. So I was well aware, not so much, buddy, no offense, buddy, but I knew of you two gentlemen as like a Bill Apter, George Napolitano. I mean, guys that have been around this business for so long. So I knew your guys' credibility, but to do the research and to see, your due diligence of what you guys really did and put pen to paper. I mean, Evan, with you, the most important thing or interesting thing that I found are the books, Apartment 4B, Life in Brooklyn, and then your dad's Hey Cabbie, a New York cab.
Thank you.
I am really, really interested in that. Those look like incredible reads, and it's just stuff that I did under research. Impressive. And Tiger Khan. I worked with Tiger. What a story.
What a tragic story.
Yeah.
Evan, I worked with him in the late 90s in the indie circuit in the Northeast. We were on some Northeast wrestling events. We might have been on North American different shows, and that's when he was performing also with Juan Xavier, who just passed away recently. And Tiger Khan was an incredible worker, and he was just such a nice guy. I was looking through pictures over here down in the bunker before, And I have several with Tiger, and I was like, wow, you don't really realize it until I knew I was going to come on here and do a little more research. And Tiger Khan, he was a good guy, but what a very tragic story.
Yeah, he died at 33, and Buddy's close friend was Bison Smith, who died at what, 40?
40, yeah.
40. So we're actually thinking of doing a documentary project where it's almost like The Big Chill, where Buddy and I come together and try to like bury these ghosts because, you know, a decade later, more than a decade later, you know, it still kind of haunts you that we lost these guys so young.
Yeah.
And you have a fair share of the people that you said that you work with. I mean, what are your feelings about, like, you know, Butch Reed just died recently, and
let me tell you something, buddy. It's funny that you should ask that, because I've gone through so many different photos lately since, you know, I retired officially from in-ring managing in like 07, 08. And after I lost my daughter in 2015, I transitioned to Paradise Alley because they were doing a bunch of different products for another kid who had gotten killed in an accident. So it brought us together. I hooked up with Paradise Alley and with Roma and those guys. And that's what brought me back into the business and where I am now. So I look back at all my memories, whether it's Big Dick Dudley or The Wall or Yokozuna or Umaga or Chris Candido or Ted Petty, or the guys that I appeared with on Jerry Springer. It seems like half of the pictures that I would put on a way back Wednesday, throwback Thursday, flashback Friday type memory thing, all these guys have passed. And what do I feel about it? I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm no angel. When I traveled the circuits in the early and middle 90s and late 90s, especially into the 2000s, there was drugs and alcohol and everything everywhere. And I'm not going to shy away from that. People were doing cocaine. People were doing pills. They were taking somas. People were partying as soon as we left the arena. And it doesn't matter if you were in a big arena in a top-notch show with a big promotion, or you were in an outlaw mud show. And I hate to use that phrase because I respect everyone who steps in the ring. It was rampant. I would see the boys slamming the alcohol, popping the somas, going to bed, doing a line. I'm going to break it down to you real here, because this is the character and the person that I am for real. There's a fine line, but I've seen it all and could probably write a dark side on some of the guys and the things that I saw. And I'm going to own my own responsibility in this, because I was a part of all of that too. Thankfully, I'm here years later, and I'm a family man in faith, and you realize what's important, and at a time in your life, you know what's to put away. Look who we just lost recently. We lost Orndorff, all unbelievable Paul Orndorff. Del Wilkes, who, Evan, you know recently just from being on the WWAB and on all that, and then throwing one of the young bloods. There's just been so many people. And it's just so unfortunate, and I believe a lot of it has to do with our high steroid use, being on the road, the bumps and the bruises, not seeing your family, alcoholism, abuse, the whole 9 yards. And that's just the reality of it.
Well, let me ask you this, because I've had these debates online. When let's say Vince McMahon has these guys wrestling 300 plus days a year back in the day, and you're hurt, and you're worried about losing your push, losing your spot, you know, what responsibility does the promoter have also? Because some of these guys are taking the pain pills. I've had wrestlers say to me, Evan, I'm always in pain. Always. That's the word they use. So you know, there's no off season. These aren't farm animals. You know, sometimes somebody's hurt and they need to go home and rest and recuperate. So, you know, I think there's two sides to this, you know, not just partying.
100%. Most of it, believe it or not, Evan, wasn't partying. To begin with, when you first leave, now I can't speak to the WWE or the WCW. I never signed a contract. I was not in a big promotion. I worked for 100 promotions on all the independents, but I got to work with all the legends, the stars, and the young lions. And I learned a lot because I wasn't a full-time worker and I was a manager. I ended up learning a lot about these guys on the road. And you're right. I was booked maybe 100 times a year, 125 times a year. These guys were booked 350 days. And you're right. Living that life on the road, and it wasn't to party. I know that I came off that way, that we went and we partied to begin with, and that's what it's all about. But it's the ability of what these guys do day in, day out. It's the most serious sport that anyone could ever imagine. And the bumps and bruises, if you've ever gotten in there and taken one bump, this is as legit as anyone could ever imagine. And when people say, I'll tell, okay, it's scripted. Oh, okay. But either you're an athlete and you can get in there and do it, or you can't, and you have to physically perform. I know, because I couldn't cut the mustard. It was the hardest thing I ever did in my life. So, Evan, your point is well taken. What are you supposed to do when there's no health and wellness? A touchy subject. There's no unions. You'll get thrown right out if you ever try to bring up stuff like that. You got to pay out of your own pocket for a lot of different things, and look at the life you're living of on the road, hitting the gym, trying to recover. If you're not taking some sort of steroid, and I'm not condoning it, or some sort of enhancement to get through, it was tough, especially in the 70s and 80s.
I was sitting at a gimmick table. I'll make it real quick, Mike. I was sitting at the gimmick table yesterday at the Hamburg convention. I was right by the door, just by sheer coincidence, and all these guys are walking in. I would say 90% of these guys were not walking well. They were hunched over, walking very gingerly. You know, clearly their body had taken a terrible toll. And your body's not meant to take bumps 300, 310, 20, 30, 40 days a year. It's just not meant for it. Right, Mike? Mike has a medical background.
Yeah, I was going to add this. 2 years after he was released, I forget which company, it was WCW, but I think it was the last run in WWF at the time. Davey Boy Smith was on and is now credited, sadly, with what we call the wrestler's cocktail. He wasn't wrestling, but he was still doing all of the PEDs, performance enhancers, and the uppers to get up in the morning and the downers at night so he could rest. The wrestler's cocktail, which allegedly killed him and others, and it's attributed to him. He wasn't even working for a company, but he still felt like he had to keep his body up in case, according to him, in quotes, Vince threw me a bone, etc. And you hear about this time and time again, and it's really, it is heartbreaking, the number of friends that we've lost.
Dr. Mike, that's an excellent point. And it's nice to see guys nowadays, when I listen to other programs and you listen to someone like a Tommy Dreamer, who I had a chance to work with on the Indies several times. What a guy. You see that he's put all his issues behind him. He's still an ambassador. But here's a guy who can barely tie his shoes. Now, just as a manager, I've only taken the one or two big bumps a match. Even at my age, at almost 60 years old, both knees, my lower back. I've had 6 concussions. I've had 3 torn rotator cuffs because I was a guy like a Captain Lou who I wanted to make sure sell some more. And if I can't make it look real, then I'm not going to go out there. So that's why I had to make up for twice as much. And just to get down there, to be fortunate enough and blessed to be with you guys for this opportunity, just sitting here, I'm rubbing both knees. I got an ice pack on my back, and I'm a guy who was just someone who was fortunate enough to work with a bunch of famous people in the independents. So I couldn't imagine, as I talked to Roma and Paul Perez and Mario and guys like that, and the young kids that come in, and you see, like Evan said, from being in Hamburg last night, and what Doc attested to, every one of them's crippled, multiple surgeries, fusions. It really is no joke. And you could say that as yourself, as a manager as well. I'm sure you've taken the bumps.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no. And you know, with you got to pay for the emergency room visits yourself, and you know, your health insurance benefits. You know, your premiums go up when you claim them in all the time. Yeah, and there's, I don't know, it's hard to understand why everyone wants to be in this business, but that chance for stardom and fame, once you have an audience that believes what you want them to believe, it's hard to give that up. And Evan, were you managing in a match at the Hamburg?
No, I was just working a gimmick table yesterday, but I was talking to all these guys, and it hurts me when over the years, Dr. Mike will tell you, you see Abdullah the Butcher in a wheelchair. Captain Lou was in a wheelchair. Iron Sheik was in a wheelchair. Harley Race, Harley Race in a wheelchair broke my heart, man. And, you know, and I'm not going to name names, but I'm telling you, I would guesstimate 80–90% of the guys yesterday, their bodies were a mess. And, you know, like I said before, when someone says to you, I'm always in pain, that's quite a sacrifice to entertain people, you know, really.
And I'm going to give you guys my opinion why, and you had alluded to it, of why do people do this? Why do people want to get into this business? And I'm just going to speak for me back to the early 70s when I saw Bruno Sammartino against Tor Kamada. And I was lucky enough to shake Stan Stasiak, and even into my 30s, I could still smell his cologne on my hand.
Yeah.
That's how much I was into it as a kid. But this is why people do it. And I said it, Evan, and I refer to him because he's who I perform with now. Just like being last night, and you can see that I'm still recovering from being on the green room last night with Avi Klein. And you guys have performed before. The feeling of performing in front of a crowd and walking through that curtain, or being on TV, or just being able to give something back as an entertainer, knowing that you can tell a story, whether it's in front of 5 people or 50,000 people, that you can bring them up, bring them down, you can have them eat out of the palm of your hands. And the feeling of coming back, the exhilaration is better than any high or any buzz that I've ever had in my life. I told my wife last night, after such a performance, and I've had this happen many times, that I crashed after I got off, and I felt like I was run over by a truck. And then to get up this morning, and I didn't even take a bump. And to get up this morning because of that adrenaline rush and that feeling, I felt sore like I took 3 or 4 bumps from the Dudley Boys last night. That's why people do it, because you can almost not capture that feeling unless you've done it.
Yeah, and let me just add this. You know, this goes beyond just wrestling. James Brown was doing splits until his knees would bleed. Prince ended up on painkillers from doing splits. Prince died young, you know. So a performer, a true performer, is always going to give 110%, and sometimes it has a real toll on the human body. Yeah.
I mean, it really is an unbelievable feeling. And, you know, just to jump back to something, because I very rarely talk about these things. The one thing that I'm grateful and most blessed for in my whole life in this business, I've always been a fan. I'll always be a fan. I don't get insulted if you call me a mark or a nobody, because I could care less. I have videos and photos and stories and memories of guys that agree to work with me, whether it be Terry Funk or Yoko to Simone. A list goes on, just like you guys could do. I don't want to name drop. I've been in with over 25 WWE Hall of Famers, and still nobody knows me. But you know what I'm okay with? Those guys, and the brotherhood and the bonding and being able to trust somebody with your body, and them have confidence and say, hey, listen, let's bring the bald fat guy in over here too. And he adds something to the match. And who is that fat guy that always running around the ring and seems to get in the video? And you know what? Mick Foley, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, Terry Funk, Yoko, Rikishi, they all said, is Chaos on the show? Big Daddy on the show? Let me have Bundy on. Let me have him, because we just had a genuine connection. We had fun. We enjoyed it. And that's the most important thing, Evan, Doc, buddy, that I could take with me for the rest of my life. It really is something that's why I still have the passion in this age to continue to try to give back to the people that were so generous to me.
There you go. I don't think we could end on a better note than that.
No, that's absolutely amazing. That's
plug anything you want to plug.
Yeah, you answered a couple of my key questions I was going to ask. You already got to them.
Plug. A guy like me can't plug anything. The only
plug
thing
Avi shows. I love Avi.
I'm blessed and fortunate that Evan and Dr. Mike and Buddy, that you guys gave me a chance to come on here. I have a lot of fun with this. I'm always active and involved. I'll be announcing on Fight TV for Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling. I'll be doing all their color and play-by-play, which I've done for years. So that's coming up in August and for the next couple of years. And then, of course, the WWAB. And Evan, you were a part of it yourself, and everybody was gushing to be a part of the green room every Saturday Night Live, and what Avi Klein is trying to do with that group of guys and where they're going. It's a cross between Saturday Night Live and Days of Our Lives. Hey, listen, Evan, kayfabe's alive. I got shot last night.
There you go.
I only got grazed, though. Doc, make an appointment to come down and see you. I only got grazed.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I need something on here, though. Evan, and this is what I want you guys to remember about me more than anything. This is kayfabe is still alive, man. I love you guys for having me on.
Oh,
all right, thank you so much for being our guest. Love to have you on in the future. Again, we have some more stuff to promote, and thanks for being here. We'll see everyone else again next week. Thank you for joining us. Good night.
Namaste.